Hey there, and welcome. Have you ever really stopped to think about what's going on when you do something simple, like wave to a friend or pick up your morning coffee? Or something complex, like an all-out sprint? It feels so automatic, right? But behind every single one of those moves is this incredible biological engine working overtime. Today, we're going to pop the hood on that engine and take a journey deep inside to see exactly how it all works.
It really all boils down to one big question that sounds simple, but is actually, well, it's pretty mind-blowing. How does a thought, just an idea in your head, turn into a real physical action out in the world? How do you go from, hey, I should pick up that book, to your arm actually reaching out and grabbing it? That's the mystery we're going to unravel together today.
Okay, so before we dive into all the microscopic, nitty-gritty details, let's zoom out. We need to start with the big picture, just to get a handle on the basic concepts of how we, and pretty much all animals, get around.
All right, first up, a key term we've got to get our heads around is locomotion. Now, this isn't just any old movement. It's a very specific kind. Locomotion is all about voluntary movements that actually change your location, that get you from point A to point B. So think walking, running, swimming, climbing. If it's moving your whole body somewhere else, that's locomotion. And that brings us to a really important distinction. See, all locomotion is movement. But, and this is the key part, not all movement is locomotion. For instance, just moving your jaw to chew your food, that's definitely a movement, right? But you're not exactly walking across the room with your mouth. So it's a critical difference to keep in mind as we go forward. So how does any of this actually happen? Well, if locomotion is the goal, then muscles are the engines that make it happen. They're these amazing specialized tissues that are literally built to turn chemical energy, the fuel from our food, into the raw force that powers absolutely everything we do. And it turns out we have 3 different types of these engines in our bodies. You've got visceral or smooth muscle. That's the stuff in our organs that works without us thinking about it. Then there's cardiac muscle, which is only found in the heart. It's also involuntary. And thank goodness for that, right? I mean, can you imagine having to remember to make your heart beat? But for our journey today, the real star of the show is skeletal muscle. You can see it's striped or striated, and most importantly, it's the one we control. This is the muscle that moves our skeleton. All right, it's time to zoom in, like way in. We're going from the bicep you can flex and see in the mirror, all the way down into the microscopic world of the components that make it tick. Welcome to the engine room. A muscle is structured in this incredibly neat way. It's kind of like a set of Russian nesting dolls. The whole muscle is made up of big bundles. Each of those bundles is made up of smaller muscle fibers, which are basically the muscle cells. And then, inside each of those fibers, you find the real engine parts, thousands of tiny little threads all lined up, called myofibrils.
So when you get a muscle fiber under a microscope, you can see that striped pattern we mentioned earlier, this really distinct pattern of dark and light bands. And let me tell you, that pattern isn't just for looks. It's the first clue, the visual evidence of the incredibly organized machinery packed inside.
And this diagram here, it breaks it all down. Those stripes are created by a super precise repeating arrangement of 2 different kinds of protein filaments. You have thin ones and thick ones. The lighter stripes, called I bands, are where you only have the thin filaments. The darker A bands, that's where the thick filaments are, and they actually overlap with the thin ones. This perfect organization is the secret to everything. And that repeating unit, that little piece of machinery, it has a name, the sarcomere. It's the chunk of a myofibril from one of those dark Z lines to the next. You can think of it like this. If a myofibril is a really long train, each sarcomere is a single car. And this is the fundamental unit where all the magic of muscle contraction happens.
So we know what contracts. It's the sarcomere. But now, for the million-dollar question, how does it contract? This brings us to the absolute heart of our explainer today. This beautiful, elegant process known as the sliding filament theory. It's like a molecular dance.
And of course, every great dance needs its dancers. In our case, we've got 4 main protein players on the floor. First up is actin. That's the thin filament. And you can think of it as the dance floor itself. Then you have myosin, the thick filament. This is our star dancer with these little heads that act like tiny motors. And finally, you have tropomyosin and tropominin. Think of them as the club's bouncers. They decide when the dance is allowed to happen. Let's get a closer look at our 2 stars here. Over on the left, that's the actin filament. See how it looks kind of like 2 strings of pearls twisted together? Each of those pearls has a special spot where myosin is just dying to attach. And on the right, that's myosin. Check out that globular head. That is the business end of this whole operation.
It's got a spot to grab actin and another one to use ATP, which is the cell's energy fuel.
So a great question is, why aren't our muscles just contracting all the time? Well, it's because when a muscle is resting, our bouncer proteins are on the job. Tropomyosin is physically laying over all those binding sites on the actin dance floor. And troponin is the lock that holds tropomyosin right there in place. The myosin heads want to dance, but they're completely blocked.
Okay, so here's how we kick off the dance party. Step 1, it all starts with a signal from a nerve. That signal tells the muscle cell to release a flood of calcium ions. And calcium is the key that unlocks everything. Step 2, the calcium rushes in and binds to troponin. This makes troponin change its shape. And when it does, it yanks the tropomyosin rope out of the way. Suddenly, the dance floor is open. Step 3, the myosin head, which is already energized, instantly latches onto an open spot on the actin, forming what we call a cross bridge. Then it performs the power stroke. It pivots and pulls the actin filament inward. And finally, step 4, a brand new ATP molecule comes in and binds to the myosin head. This makes it let go of the actin and then it resets, ready to grab on and pull again.
And this isn't a one-and-done deal. It's a super fast, repeating cycle. As long as there's calcium and fuel, ATP, around, those little myosin heads will just keep grabbing, pulling, letting go, and resetting, over and over and over again. It's like thousands of tiny oars all rowing in perfect sync.
So what's the result of all that rowing? Well, the thin actin filaments get pulled toward the very center of the sarcomere. They literally slide over the thick myosin filaments. You can see the Z-lines get closer, those light-colored eye bands shrink, and the whole sarcomere shortens. Now imagine billions of these sarcomeres shortening all at once. That is what we feel as a muscle contraction.
Okay, we've seen the tiny molecular engine in all its glory. Now, let's zoom back out and connect this amazing microscopic dance to the bigger systems that actually control it and give it a purpose.
So where does that first signal, that spark, come from? Well, it all starts as a thought in your brain. That command travels like an electrical impulse down a long nerve cell called a motor neuron. When it gets to the muscle, it releases a chemical messenger. That messenger creates a new electrical signal, this time in the muscle fiber itself. And that is what triggers that flood of calcium we talked about. It's a perfect chain reaction, from thought to nerve to chemical to contraction.
But here's the thing. A muscle contracting by itself is pretty useless. It can't do anything unless it has a solid framework to pull against. And that, of course, is where our skeletal system comes in. The bones act as levers. When our muscles contract and pull on those bones, that's what creates the meaningful, powerful, coordinated movements that let us walk, run, and live.
When you really, truly stop and think about it, it is just extraordinary. Every single step you take, every object you lift, is the result of this magnificent process. It's just tiny proteins pulling on other tiny proteins, billions and billions of times over, all kicked off by a chemical signal and powered by a little bit of energy. It's a masterpiece of biological engineering happening inside you every second of every day. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to ponder. We've seen how perfectly this tiny engine is designed to work, but that brings up a whole new set of questions, doesn't it? What happens when things go wrong? What happens when it starts to run out of fuel, out of ATP, and you get fatigued? Or what happens when the signals from the nerves get crossed or interrupted? It just goes to show you, understanding how it all works so beautifully is the first, most important step to understanding what to do when it doesn't.